name is Mason Williams. I'm the Director of Technology at First Baptist Arlington. This is Danny Andrade. He's our sound engineer and a really talented guy. Just a little bit about myself real quick. That's my family there. I'm from West Texas, I live in the Odessa area. I currently live in Rockwall, Texas. I do make the drive to Arlington every day if you know the area. I have a family of 6, 4 kids, and they keep me busy all the time. I have my degrees in sound technology, but after school I quickly got a job in broadcast and kind of learned the gamut of those things. So essentially, kind of my passion now, I love audio still, but my passion is more graphics, 3D and 2D motion graphics. That's my website down at the bottom if you want to check out some of the work that I do. And I have 16 plus years in the audiovisual industry, and I love what I do. It's a lot of fun. I've been with First Baptist Arlington for about 2 years now, and Danny's been there a little bit longer, for about 3 years, so I'll let him kind of talk about himself a little bit.
My name is Dan Andrade. Been at First Baptist Arlington for 3 years. I have a degree in recording technology, emphasis in studio, and then as like Mason, kind of veered off to live production, live audio production at that point. And so I don't have a family, I don't have kids, single. I just put a picture of one of the last shows that I did 2 weeks ago. And so
Danny freelances quite a bit.
Yeah, freelance quite a bit. So it's been a privilege being here, and it's been good stuff.
And just brief history of our church. The reason I want to show this is because I think it's pertinent when we're talking about the styles of worship and why we do what we do. The First Baptist Arlington is the oldest known church in Arlington. It was built in 1871. It's got a 5,000 plus membership. It's a very family-oriented church, very traditional church, extremely traditional church. So the whole move to contemporary is sort of new for us. We've been doing it for a little while, but we do have a large portion of our congregation that still highly prefers the classic form of worship. So that's still kind of the core of what we do every Sunday. And of course, our senior pastor is Dr. Dennis Wallace. He's on the Board of Regents here at Baylor. Really, really great guy. So from there, I guess we can talk a little bit. We're going to cheat on our notes a little bit because we don't have a full PowerPoint for this. We kind of wanted to show y'all images of the services as we're talking. But also I wanted to mention, if y'all have any questions, feel free to interject, interrupt. We don't mind that. So essentially, like I said, 2 different styles of worship, contemporary and classic. Danny, do you want to start us off on that?
So,
Just kind of talking, we're going to talk through the technical stuff. This is going to be a little bit more of a technical conversation than the last one, so go for it.
Yeah. A lot of it's geared what we do for our Sunday services to get from contemporary and then transition over to have the orchestra, our classic services, what we call it. And so when we first started out, my first year there, we were doing a blended type of service. So it was, band, you had your rhythm section along with orchestra and choir. And so it was in the best interest of our leadership to kind of separate them both, to have 2 expressions. And so that's where we landed at. We're having 2 separate services. And so as you see, you'll see pictures roll through. Our first set of pictures would be this is what our contemporary service looks like. And then as it goes on, you'll see pictures of our classic service.
Danny, kind of describe the juxtaposition between contemporary and classic as far as instrumentation and layout. Like we have an orchestra pit, we have a choir loft, versus all the instruments and stuff being on stage.
Yeah, so we have to make both worlds happen and be
with very little turnaround
time stuff.
So it's the same place where you have both.
Absolutely.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And I think, like from earlier, our first session, to make this happen, our AVO installer put great attention to making sure that it fits for both services. So
one thing we spoke about in our last session, we were talking about the actual renovation of our sanctuary to make sure that we could accommodate contemporary and classic worship. One of the things that was really important was the acoustic design, because we didn't want a completely dead room for for classic, but we couldn't have the room too live for contemporary because of the drums and the percussion that's added in. I mean, there is some percussion in the classic, but not a big drum kit. So we had to find a mixture of both to accommodate that. And that was a major consideration in the renovation. Just so y'all know, not to tread old ground, but we did hire an acoustician to actually design the materials that were going to go into the room. He didn't have a lot to say on the design of the room because the architects are very picky about that, but he was able to give them ideas on a lot of the materials and the way that the materials should be constructed so that we had a pretty flat sounding room without it being totally dead. Yes, sir.
Okay, so is that a choir loft behind?
That is the choir loft. So let me stop this right there.
I was just trying to imagine. It looks like the screens are in front, but are they actually behind?
They're behind. They're behind, yes.
Oh,
So these
okay.
are 20-some-odd foot screens that are hung directly above the choir loft. In fact,
Okay.
incidentally, there are a few, you can see these panels on the sides.
Yeah.
We actually have a digital organ
Uh-huh.
that has speakers instead of pipes.
Uh-huh.
So those live in that area, behind that little loft portion, and then some of them live almost directly behind the screens themselves as well. Just FYI, it's kind
And
of.
then y'all yank the screens up for the
Nope.
classic. Okay.
Those are actually static screens. Those do not move. So we still we still project video onto it. We use it, honestly, we use it about the same as contemporary. Y'all probably know him, our classic worship pastor, Dr. Bob Brooks. He's our interim pastor, and he's our leader, and he has actually, we've done things where we've shown a video that's synced to the music, and we've run kind of sort of a click track to an in-ear system, and he'll basically conduct the orchestra and the choir as we're showing, pretty images of landscapes and things like that, just whatever flows with the music. So we do special things like that from time to time. But yeah, so, sorry, I have to keep buttons because it's set to slideshow. But that is the choir loft.
When you do that, do you is the click in ProPresenter and then you out it?
We'll get to that.
Okay. Sorry,
It's a
I was
great
just-
question, but
I
we'll
was
get
just
to that.
curious.
Yes. Yeah, and if we don't, remind me and we will, just in case we run out of time.
So our contemporary service, as you see, we have a full band setup. We do use tracks. We use software. It's called Ableton. I don't know if you're familiar with that software.
Multi-track software.
And so what we do to get this service is our interim worship, so contemporary worship associate, which is Father Bunnell. He'll go in, load the tracks up, and arrange it to whoever's leading that song. And so we would transpose somewhat, and he'll arrange it for that specific person. And then I'll get it, and I'll pre-mix it down to the music. So I'll go through the whole service of his arrangement, make sure everything fits right. And we don't add a lot of the tracks, we don't add drums or anything like that. I pretty much use a lot of the keys and synth to add a feel to it.
And you can see our space is limited on the stage, and of course our volunteer pool at times throughout the year can be limited. So we can't throw all of the instruments that were originally intended to be in the original track on stage, if that makes sense. We
So you
can't
don't
add
have like the drum set?
So there is a drum set. This is a custom drum booth
Right there.
designed by the
Okay.
acoustician. It's back there. So it's not pretty, but it's really functional.
And along with Ableton, we also have it triggering our lyrics as well. So we'll have a
nice.
MIDI signal going through it. So as they're singing, the lyrics follows it.
Right.
So what
You
we've
don't have to
done,
have anybody.
We do have someone just in case if it fails, but hasn't failed yet. So.
no, so what we do is we basically link the Ableton MacBook with our iMacs in the control room that we use for graphics, and we use, basically, I set up MIDI cues, and then Charlie uses that as a template, our worship leader, he'll use it as a template, and he'll insert it. The reason for that is because he knows when he wants the lyrics to go in. If I would do it, I would probably butcher it, and I have butchered it a couple times. But it's a really streamlined, it's a cool process. You kind of have to get used to it, but it is a cool process. And if we wanted to, we could actually use those same cues, or at least some of those cues, to cue our lighting board as well if we wanted to. We don't currently do that because there's not really a major need for it, but I'm a big fan of, if you can eliminate the room for error, the better off you're gonna be. So with the lyrics, it completely eliminates room for error, unless we actually have some sort of network crash or something like that. It's never an issue, and it hasn't been an issue thus far, unless we mess it up. If we mess it up, it's gonna be messed up, but.
And as you see, when we talked about the first service, we do have 2 operators, or actually 3. So we have the front of house person that's mixing for the congregation. Then we have a person in the orchestra booth, in the orchestra pit, sorry, that's actually mixing for all the musicians for their in-ear systems or their monitors and everything. It just caters to them. And then we have a broadcast as well, which, as we talked about, first session is what I do is take all my signals, my channels, and I put them down to stems, group them down to stems, and I send them to broadcast to make it as well easy for our volunteers to manage that.
So this is the example of the broadcast console. It's a much smaller console, much more limited on channels. And so what he's physically doing there is pretty much every fader you see here is a stereo mix of something that Danny's sending from front of house. So instead of sending kick, snare, overheads and toms and all that stuff, he's sending it in a 2 mix, so in a stereo mix. So we do have control over, let me jump back to that. We do have control over EQ, dynamics, effects, but ultimately Danny's kind of giving us the meat of what we need in order to make it happen. So,
Do y'all have contemporary services happening at your church at the moment? Yeah. That's the house console. So yeah, the purpose of doing that was just, again, to keep it streamlined, keep it simple for our volunteers. We're always thinking about them, putting them to be successful for every Sunday, not to have them fail. And so that's one of the reasons why we did that. It can get really complicated if you have a separate console with all your ins and outs on it. It can get really complicated doing that. And it just takes a different type of expertise to kind of make that sound good for stream purposes. And so we currently do live stream, and then we also put our stuff on Vimeo as well. And
from the live stream,
It's
a post thing that we do after the fact.
And so we do that every Sunday. And then as we wind down the service, then we get into a classic service as well. I don't know if you have any.
Well, let's talk a little bit, for contemporary, let's talk a little bit about proper mic placement for those instruments. And,
so as you can see as well, we use, we mic out all the drums. We use DIs for bass. We do have guitar ISO boosts. So I didn't notice if you saw that. I don't think we have pictures of the booth. We do have cabinets in the back. So what that allows us to do is our electric guitar player goes and plugs in, and we have like a switch, so you get sounds what he's looking for the song, and then we can switch it back to our ISO booth. So that's pretty cool. It's the same acoustic work as well to keep it away from the congregation. I don't know if you've been to churches or if you're having that, or you have the amp on stage just because you don't have a proper isolation booth for it. So that's very important to have that.
So essentially this,
along with drum booth as well.
right.
It's not dampening a lot, but it is controlling a lot of the overtones that you can hear from the actual, like if it was out on stage. So the purpose of this was to keep it, still have air moving through and still having it sound like a drum, not really dead. Like we were explaining earlier, that whole cylinder thing that you see, I don't know if you've seen that, that covers like a shell that just covers
Kind
all
of
the
a
way around.
prefab drum cage.
That's a big no-no for me. It doesn't work physically.
The prefab?
Yeah, that you see, I don't know, a lot of churches have them. They have like this old, big old plexiglass, and that doesn't work acoustically. It does not work. You'll get overtones of drums all over the place. Like it bounces off everywhere, reflections all over the place.
Frequencies fighting with each other.
So, yeah. So what this does, it just allows for energy and air to move, but still have control over the
You
drums as well.
custom built it, I heard you say?
Yes, it was custom built. Yeah.
So along with the room, when we went through the renovation a few months back, when the acoustician was designing the acoustic pieces to the room, we had requested a custom drum booth for that very purpose. So he used a lot of the materials that he used in the room for this booth. And so what he did is he delivered the plans and the materials to our installation company, and then they built it. So this, I think this is the first one they did. I think they're looking at other installations for it. So, like I said, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, and you can always cover it in whatever fabric you want to. But it works, and you can't see it in this photo, but right on the other side of this wall is a robotic PTZ camera, so we can get really up close, tight shots of the drummer as well. So you don't. This is kind of hidden from the audience a little bit, but the drummer's always on the screen on IMAX. So that was kind of the idea. Is we'll push him out of the way so that it's not such an eyesore, a gaping black hole on the stage, you know. But at the same time, we can still show the audience that there's somebody playing those drums. So and it works very well.
Excuse me, sorry to keep asking.
No,
go for it.
What is it made out of? What kind of?
It's a perforated drywall, so there's, I don't know if you know what it is, and then then it works. That's the way our whole room is made out of that.
So that's what you mean by letting air flow through?
Yes, energy moving through, like passing it, not just stopping.
Bouncing around.
Not bouncing around, just
Right.
flowing through. That's the whole point of that.
If you take a close look, this is a nice.
That's another thing too, like our orchestra,
Right.
as well as the same type of material. I mean, you can't really see the
little
holes, but
dots
it
in the
is
wall
all
there.
perforated as well.
It's perforated wood,
So,
and the whole room is designed with that. In fact, probably a good 8 foot of the walls surrounding the room, just on the sides, is made out of mahogany or something like that.
Wood panels.
And
Wood panels.
initially, the architect asked the craftsmen to put those holes in that, and they wouldn't do it because they don't want to ruin their art. And that's understandable. So what he had to do was kind of figure out some ways to work around that. Basically, he put more fabric in the room to absorb some of those frequencies and offset, you know, some of the bouncing frequencies. But like Danny said too, so let me see if I can find a picture. Okay, so here's the sanctuary. If you were to literally walk through this wall and through the choir loft, on the other side there are small closets about yay high that we put the guitar amplifiers in, and they were custom built to be acoustically isolated from everything. That's where we mic up the guitar cabinets and all that good stuff, and it really helps. So essentially, at the end of the day, when you look at the stage in its entirety, there's not a lot of noise coming off the stage. Now, obviously, if you've got acoustic instruments in the orchestra pit, or and which we do use the orchestra during contemporary services sometimes as well, but or if you're using the acoustic piano, you're going to get stage noise from that, but it's negligible. I mean, it's not that much. And like Danny said too, they're behind this stage, right in this area right here. We do have some guitar cabinets, but those are only there so that they can check their tone while they're on the stage. Then they hit a switch, and it sends the signal back to the amplifier in those isolation booths. So, and that was kind of a custom designed guitar setup so that we would have the ability to do that. Do they use it that much?
Yeah, they do.
Okay.
A lot of, and again, the thing here was just like, when I got here to First Baptist Arlington, you know, they didn't like drums on the stage, and I don't want to hear guitars either. So, you know, we had to make it so where it's not distracting.
Of course.
And so that's what, you know, we made a custom booth for the drums, and then we had the guitar amps and a custom booths for that. So that you're able to play them and not be distracted to anyone else on congregation while they're worshiping. And so that's one of the things. And then as well, the choir, as you can see, the choir loft, the whole shell there is also a treatment as well, acoustic treatment as well. And so we have 80 seats,
Something like that.
something like that in the choir when we do a choir, but
I assume, I think it's a safe assumption, but I wanted to ask, that for the traditional service, and you're probably going to progress to this, so I probably should, you can say, you can talk about it later. But I assume you have to mic the choir.
Oh, yeah. We
And
mic the choir,
everything,
yes.
you've deadened it such where there's no natural acoustics.
Well,
Yeah.
you would think that, but it's still pretty live. It's just controlled. That was again, we're heavily making sure that we don't kill the essence of that, the life of having a classic service. So I think right now we have it at a 1 second reverb time, around 2, close to 2, and that's still enough just to give it through the room. So literally, if we have a full orchestra in there and a choir, I don't turn on anything at all. We can get away with just having them on stage like that.
Howdy.
So, but yes, I do my choir. I have 10 microphones for each position, and I place them where I want them to be. So when you see them, they kind of look weird, but they're actually placed perfectly to have that choral sound. I'm not looking for that specific one person or soprano just right at your face. Same thing with the orchestra. I do have clip-on mics for our violins, area mics for violas, or secondary violins, area mics for trumpets, trombones. Haven't mic'd the timpani yet, because we haven't had a timpani player. Tuba as well, and flutes and clarinets, what we mic. So all that's all area mic. And our classic service, our congregation loved it a lot. And then when I just turn it up and the first hymn that goes, like, oh my gosh, it sounds amazing. So I mean, I think that's pretty cool. So.
Could you talk, Danny, a little bit about the functioning of the monitor world and just how in a contemporary setting
Yeah, so
that's used?
And for that, the reason why we did that too is just so we can take that responsibility from front of house. Before we did the renovation, I was doing all that. So I was doing monitors for the musicians on stage and still trying to mix for the congregation, which can get a little difficult from time to time because sometimes you're mixing what you hear in a house, but it's not really what they need to be hearing in their ears or the wedge. And so that's what we decided to separate the two responsibilities to have solo. And so what we do for our monitors, our vocalists have belt packs, so we have up to 8. We can have up to 8 vocalists at a time. They're just mix packs that you just click in and put the headphones on, and our musicians are a personal mixer. So similar to like an Avion, if you've seen an Avion, we use the ME1s, Allen Heath ME1s. That allows us to have 32 inputs on it, so 32 channels of what we wanted to dedicate for that personal mixer. And again, like I was telling you, our front of house console, we can do up to 192 inputs and 98 outs, and our monitor world does 144 and the same 98 outs. So we extensively thought about, if we were going to really have more instrumentation, or we have the capability of doing that. That was another thing too. We didn't just stop.
Okay, so you don't run a mix of wedges and in-ears?
I do sometimes. It just depends. When we have like an ensemble happening, I do put the wedge out for them.
But just a normal praise team?
It's all ears.
All ears, okay.
Yes.
And then you said there was a pack?
Yeah, so the vocalists have a pack. It's like a little pack, like maybe this small, like a bell
So
pack.
they only get like one signal from?
No, it's a stereo feed. So
Stereo feed.
it's a left and right feed, and then I'm able to create the space for them on stage and pan stuff out for them and separately EQ.
Okay, so you mix.
Yes,
They tell you kind of, here's what we're needing, and then you get up to 8 vocalists on that.
sometimes, yeah.
Okay. What is that system called? 'Cause
Well,
I gotta
the
get
system we
rid of it.
use are the Shure PSM 1000s. That's what we use at the moment.
Say that again, sorry.
PSM 1000s. And then the personal mixers that our musicians use are the Allen Heath ME1s, which is again similar to all the other ones you see, like Avions, the P16s from Behringer. It's the same
Yeah,
concept.
we've got it for the musicians, it's
Yeah.
just for the singers, they need to take that next step.
And what, again, that allows us, because we're playing click and tracks, so, with the wedge, we can't run a click track to that. So that allows us to use the Ableton software for them to have the click to stay on time.
And stage noise, I mean.
And
that's-
stage noise as well, so it
That's a
helps
big
a lot.
part of it.
Because before we did the renovation, we still had drums and all the instrumentation. It was pretty loud on stage. It was loud.
Oh.
Before, before we did our renovation, it was pretty loud. And so.
I don't have to imagine that. No, of course.
I don't have a problem with that. I love loud.
Yeah, but sometimes,
It's
it
hard to
competes with
mix.
the house.
Yeah,
of course.
It competes with the house and it's a distraction.
Exactly.
You know, and the whole purpose of.
And the closer you are to the stage, the more messy you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
Let me jump off of that just for a second. One thing I wanted to talk about was, of course, one of the things that we were able to upgrade, and you can kind of see it being used, probably a little overkill in this picture, but is we added a lot more scenic lighting, so a lot more colored lighting. I mentioned before in our earlier session, you can see right now, the house lights even have the ability to change color. They have RGB engines built into them, which is really, really cool when you're trying to sort of invoke a certain atmosphere. It's a really neat thing to have. Most of the time we keep them white, but sometimes when you're really wanting to kind of punch things up at a dramatic point in the song, it's good to change those out. Of course, we've got all the lighting. Well, I've got other pictures of the classic service, but we've got full service lighting across the board as far as subject, key and fill lighting. And then, of course, we've got a few movers. Those do not get used in the classic service at all, except for when we're lighting parts of the walls and things like that, just so it looks better on camera, so it's not dark. But outside of that, we have a full Par 64 setup with colored LED lights, backlighting the talent, as well as some incandescents backlighting the talent as well. And it's a really functional system. It's not that complex. It's a large system, but it works really well. And of course, you can see we also have the ability to change the color of the walls. We have coves up in the ceiling. We can change those colors as well. So it really, really helps set an atmosphere for contemporary worship. It's pretty amazing. For classic, we've found that if we just leave everything white, everybody's happy. So that's usually what we do with that.
Do y'all leave that like that during the whole service?
Ish, kind of. This is during a song set. So normally, if we're gonna have color during the actual preaching portion of it, we'd probably just do like blue walls or something like that.
But it's not much brighter.
No, and this is somewhat of an underexposed image,
Okay.
but it is bright. In fact, I could turn off all the house lights and just leave the stage lights on and the wall lights, and you could see just fine in the room. So, and that sometimes can be problematic. We've learned that, especially for shots, sometimes we'll have a welcome portion of our services, and so we'll get shots of the actual audience. And if we have too much ambient light or too much colored light coming off the sides of the walls, it's going to hit the people and they all look blue. So we have to plan that out. You know, we have to make sure that there's a cue that exists
Right.
where this light gets really toned down and the house lights come up, so on and so forth. So those are good things to plan for when you're planning lighting cues, is if you're going to get shots of the audience or certain shots of the stage, what actually looks good. I don't know if y'all iMag or use cameras or stream, but it's really important because our eyes work a lot different than a camera is going to work. Our eyes will adjust automatically. Our eyes are pretty brilliant in the way that they were designed. But cameras, they'll see a certain color and they will expose to it, and that's, you get what you get.
Right.
We do in the control room have iris control and black level control, but that only goes so far. So we also have color control, but we try not to let our volunteers go too far with that because we would end up with some funky psychedelic looking shots. But so yeah, overall that's the lighting setup. It's a lot of fun to play around with.
I didn't mention our speaker configuration here. So we have 9 boxes.
Find a better one.
So the main array, as you see here, is 9 boxes. Then we have side fills, the little top ones there. There we go. So we have 9 boxes and side fills. And then, I don't know if you saw that. Do you think you can go back to the other picture?
Sure.
And
What are you looking for? Because
the sub array.
I've got it.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay. And that's
It's kind of a weird angle,
Yeah.
but
so that's what's called an inspired sub array. So no, you can go ahead. What were you going to say?
Who's the manufacturer?
DMB, Audio Technic. And so I'll get to what they are. So an inspired sub array with another center fill. So those are single 21-inch subwoofers. And then we have 5
hung right over the stage.
and then we have 5 on the ground floor in what's called an infinite line. They're dual 18s. And then the balcony, we have 6 delay speakers as well. So it can get pretty loud if I wanted to. Pretty loud.
We don't.
But we don't do that. Go ahead, Allison.
No, you know how to, I was just gonna say, if you're conservative in your approach.
Yes.
Knowing your audience, and
Yes,
knowing
exactly.
what.
That's
Yeah.
So I run it between 92, 93 A weighted. When you go to a concert, it's not, usually it's be like 110, 115 A weighted. But in this case, since our speaker configuration is just, it was just done precisely, it just feels like it's full and rich, not loud. It just feels enough energy in the room. And so,
And talk about the balance in the room. I mean, you can pretty much be in any part of the room.
yeah, so our AV installer made sure that every pew in the seat where you're sitting at is even. There's no dead spots, there's nothing like that.
So you don't
As
walk
you
to a certain part of the room and it gets tinnier or bassier.
It gets louder
very
on one
even
side, it's
throughout
all
the
even
entire
throughout the
room.
room. Even when you go up to the balcony, it's even, yes. And so people come, we have a lot of visitors come in and just want to glance up there. Well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
DMV?
Yes, DMV Audio Technic.
It's a
So,
German-
it's a German manufacturer. They're,
How did y'all decide on, what was your short list, if I can ask? May I
our
ask?
short list would have been a Meyer system. It was about the same, price-wise, it was a little less than this, but again, we wanted to keep it musical. That was the whole purpose of it. And the speakers, through the simulations that we ran through, it worked. It was better than the Meyer system. That was our second option. And so again, our goal was to keep it musical, and it allowed us to have, control over instrumentation with the room. So it balanced out a lot within the room. So within each box, each speaker box, they're all processed separately. So it's not like I'm looping channels within speakers. Each box has its own amp. So we have about 15 DMV 3,000 watt amps up to 4 channels. So each box again are processed, and it's what this manufacturer has what's called array processing. And so what that does is it measures the room, and so you can hit properly within the seat as it goes down. So it's, again, evenly, and then for that it allows for it to be musical. And so hopefully I can.
And talk a little bit about tuning the room and the importance of that.
Yes, and
both
then-
for classic and for contemporary.
So, as far as like tuning the room, we were talking more of how we tune the room.
Yeah.
Start with, okay. So with with all that to say, we still have to go in and tune the room. So that's the first part of configuring the speakers. We still have to use DSP processors, which we have to do, because we have about 6 zones. So that allows us, again, get proper coverage within the room. And so our tuning process was to make sure, so we went through several songs. The senior audio designer for the company called Epic Resource Group, we spent about, I think it was 3 weeks just tuning the room, making sure we went through different types of styles of music. We had what's called smart, so we had 6 microphones placed within the room, and five on stands and 1 on the floor.
Calibration microphones.
Calibration microphones to evenly get proper time alignment with the low end and high end energy.
So there's no weird phasing or anything in the room.
So it was a sinuous, long procedure. It pretty much took about close to a month to get it right of tuning, just in that. So,
But it really sounds good, and I'm not tooting our own horn, but it does. The room does what it was designed to do.
I get my friends they're out there. They mix for artists, some Christian, non-Christian. They come and visit the room, and they're like, "Man, you're spoiled," because sometimes they don't get a chance to have the same, equipment for where they go. And pretty much detail. That's what it is.
We've even had much larger contemporary churches come visit the room and they're blown away, you know, and they've got way bigger budgets than we do, and they're blown away by the sound of the room. So it is nice. It's very nice.
Sorry, how much did the DMV cost, round figure, that installation?
It
with
was
that
close,
system?
it was close to like 200,000, 300,000, including with the amps as well. So that's where ballpark was, and I believe that was, they gave us a deal. So they don't sell speakers online. You have to be a dealer for them. So you can't really go and buy their product online unless you buy it used. But you have to be some sort of partner. The company that we're with are partners with them. So that's how we ended up these boxes.
And just to kind of go back to some of the video things that we kind of have to take into consideration. So when the room was built, the original room had 3 cameras. We spec'd it out to have 4, and wound up not getting 4 because they were so expensive. So what we did wind up with on the Pro end was we wound up with 3 Pro Panasonic 4K cameras. I mentioned in the last session, the reason we went with 4K originally was just for future proofing. And then we found out as we went along that, hey, Panasonic will cut us a deal on a 4K laser projector. So let's go ahead and buy that, because in the long run it's going to save us money. So we wound up turning the whole room, which was originally supposed to be just a standard HD room, into a 4K facility, which is pretty cool. I mean, it looks really good. But at the same time, 3 cameras really still weren't enough. They weren't enough when we left the room before the renovation, and they weren't enough going back into the room. So what we did to kind of get past that is we bought some of these Panasonic 4K PTZs. They're about yay big. And the reason we kept it in the Panasonic family is that they actually use similar sensors in the cameras that the broadcast cameras do. They're not as big, so I guess you could say it's not as robust, but these are really cool because we can just set them up on the stage. We have one in the drum booth, and you can get some really close-up tight shots. And what that does, and this, to me, as working in broadcast, it buys you time. It buys you time to find other shots with your larger cameras. So if you've got 3 camera operators, because really it only takes 1 camera operator in the control room on a remote to operate these 3 on their own. It takes 3 people to operate each camera that's in the back of the room, the broadcast cameras. So these help buy some time. They get more personal shots close up on the stage, and they just kind of help the camera ops find the right shot and get the right framing going. So really, really cool cameras. It's always a good consideration if you are going to go to IMAG or shooting your services to consider how many cameras do I need to pull off what I need to do. And with our contemporary service, well, with both services actually, there's so much going on. I mean, you've got a choir, you've got an orchestra, you know, a 30 and 40 piece orchestra. With the band, you've got people all over the stage. You want to be able to have the ability to capture as much as you possibly can. Now, when the pastor gets up on stage, these cameras aren't used at all, hardly. We don't need very many cameras to capture that. But when you're capturing, especially a contemporary service, the pacing for a contemporary service when you're directing is a lot quicker than for a classic service. You know, you'd make people dizzy doing that with orchestral music, you know. But with something that kind of has more of a solid beat to it, kind of bouncing around from camera to camera at a steady pace, usually produces pretty good professional results. So that's something to consider too, is if you're doing 2 varying styles of worship, video production wise, there's a big difference there, just like there is with audio. The rules change for both of them. And then, let's see, Danny. I guess we can talk a little bit about the volunteer team in contemporary versus classic and sort of the challenges. You want to talk a little bit about, just from the audio standpoint, what you deal with in getting volunteers trained for front of house and monitors and broadcast.
Yeah. So again, with the consoles that we have, we're able to multi-track. So that's a big tool to use. And that allows us to, what I do is record rehearsals, and then when the volunteer's up running for Sunday, I'll have them come back and I'll, play. I'm able to play those same tracks that we did for rehearsal and play it back for him, so that you can go over and just fine tweak anything, which is, again, a very, very, very helpful tool in training what we use to train our volunteers with. Because during rehearsal, and service, you don't have time to really explain in detail what really we're doing. Because you have to stay on cue and stay on service order.
We're very volunteer dependent,
Yes.
by the way.
As you know, me and him are the only, we have one more.
We have
So
an assistant.
Assistant, so just us three with a group of, I believe, 40 people, our volunteer group. And we all simultaneously, we change them out from other Sunday. And sometimes we do use each same person for the next service too. And so that's with that. And then the changes with the second service, I'm able to jump into the second service now?
Yeah.
Okay, for sure. So with the second service, again, it's not so, our second service, again, I try not, we don't do too much production to that
Right.
service. And so what I've done is, again, our console, I'm able to do custom layouts we have one section for contemporary, then another section for our orchestra classic service. And so that also helps out keeping ourselves organized. So when we jump onto the console, we're able to jump on, I can click that layout, and there's our classic service. And again, with those inputs dedicated for that service. Because I'm working with, for that service, I have about 50 inputs that I'm using. So that's a lot of microphones pretty much, and condenser microphones. So you can see as you know, condenser microphones are much more sensitive than a dynamic microphone. And so the balance of that's pretty, second service is, again, when the orchestra starts playing, it's just nice. It's nice, and yes, sir.
Where's the drum thing in there?
It's still in the
It's
same.
right
same
behind
area.
this guy here.
Oh,
But
okay.
you can tell, we don't light it up as much, it's not a focal point during the classic
Okay.
service,
Yeah, I can see that.
because there's no drums.
And it's not in the way of any of your choir members even. Okay, cool.
So the second service, again, going back to just when they start playing the prelude, just having to bring the master fader up. I almost just leave it where I set my level, and I just leave it alone. I just cue in our pastor headset or pulpit mic. And with this service, it's pretty cool because our organ, since I have no control over it, the organ player, the organist is actually the one balancing out with me. And so it's been very, 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 like right on point with balancing. Consistently when she's playing any low notes or anything like that, and me having to bring a choir and or orchestra into the mix. And so, and our grand piano, so we do mark the grand piano as well. And it's very, everyone likes to sing. That's a big, important. So I try to make it so where it's not too loud, but they're still able to hear the music and still be able to sing as well. And so that's what we tell for our classic service.
One thing I'd like to mention real quick, let me back up just so we don't run out of slides here. One thing that I didn't really cover earlier, we were talking about just kind of the ability to, on our screens, kind of have multiple ways of routing and also using Ableton to drive lyrics when we want to, which is the multi-track software. We don't use Ableton that much in the classic service, but we have in the past, let me back up here for a second. We have in the past, just depends on what the service is entailing and what we're doing, but sometimes we will do full screen lyrics on one projector, and we will do this sort of IMAG with lower third lyrics on the other one. Sometimes that's more just to kind of get a vibe going in the room, depending, we can put some nice images behind the actual text. Sometimes it's just to kind of accentuate the lighting. We've done it a lot more with the contemporary than we have with the classic service, but we do have the capabilities to kind of route our graphics computers and our cameras different ways. So if we want to do something artistic, we totally have that creative license to do that. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and then with the monitoring situation with this service, each orchestra, first section player has their own personal mixer, so anytime we do use Ableton, or sometimes they'll like to blend in much more modern song with some click tracks or something like that with it, so they can hear that click track and make sure they're following along with it. And then this service, we do have where the light bar is at, we do have three speaker monitors that the choir can hear, piano, and then any soloist that's on stage. I will never put choir back in the same feed.
So you can kind of see
Never
here,
do that, so,
when I took this picture, I'm sorry, Danny, when I took this picture, I was standing in the choir loft, so you can kind of see the monitors that are aimed down at the.
So on this design, the center monitor there is just for vocals, and we have downfills on the bottom inside the choir loft.
This is the downfills.
Yes, that black square right there. So inside of that, there's like a little speaker this small, about a 2-inch speaker coming.
And hey, what do you know, you can see the amplifiers that we were talking about earlier, that's where they're sitting behind the grand piano.
And then so the center is our mono signal where we send vocals, anyone that's soloing, the pulpit mic, pastor's mic, and then the two outer, which is we have it set up as a stereo left, we send our instrumentation on that. So anything from violins, soloists, again, instrumentation solos, and piano through those choir monitors. So there's separation there, and it sounds really good too for them. They've been very pleased with them on the past years. Before the old renovation, they always talked about they couldn't hear a piano, which is, again, the main factor for our classic service, and so that helped a lot with that design. The only thing that's pretty loud up there will be the organ. Once that organ gets going, it gets pretty loud in the choir loft, but I guess they've kind of accepted that.
Oh, wow.
So that's the organ. That's a digital organ. I believe it runs on 3 interfaces with 3 servers. So I believe it has like 100 or 200 something samples on it. Sample sounds on it.
And these are all sampled from
Sampled
popular
from-
organs all over the world.
And then for the organ, it uses how was it? How many speakers was it again?
60 something.
So there's
64.
64 speakers just for the organ. And I remember the organ designer came in, when he was tuning it, it was pretty cool to see him put different sounds from left to right.
Is it
So-
Rogers?
Yes.
Yeah, there.
I do know that.
Yeah.
So it's a really,
We have a Rogers, yeah.
you what?
We have a Rogers as well. so-
Rogers? No, I'm sorry, it's not a Rogers. I'm thinking of something else. This is actually made by Marshall Ogletree.
Oh,
It's a
okay.
different manufacturer. I believe they're a newer company. Our first session, Dr. Brooks, and our more classic worship pastor, they're the company that put this organ in the what was it, the New York City when 9/11 happened. So they asked for this company to put their organ in. I forgot what church was it.
It was a big church, I don't remember either.
It was the main one on Main Street. I think that's where the main church there. And so, I think we're the 13th. I think it's the 13th one. So there's only 13 in the world right now. And so, I don't turn it on because I'm gonna break it.
No.
Just look at it. That's it. And so, that's again, pretty cool having to balance that out with orchestra, because I don't have control over that. Well, even with the proper organ, still have control, but
Sure.
it still sounds close to a real organ, so.
Could I ask a couple
Yes.
questions on your mics? What kind of mics do you use for the choir?
They're Audix, which I went through, from my experiences, I landed on this because they were actually the best ones for choir, for choral. I've used Shure's, I've used Sennheisers, I've used Chinese brands as well. That specific microphone just has this character sound to it that just really picks up the choir really, really well.
And they're hanging.
No, they're on stands, so I'll get to why we didn't hang on them. So as you see here, we have 5. In the first row, they're actually screwed into the orchestra wall here.
Oh, cool.
And then the back 5 are on stands. The reason why we didn't hang them is just because we were gonna block sidelines for the screens. And as we already have that issue to a certain extent.
And also, I mean,
And I
it
kinda like
gives you
them
the
like this.
flexibility to
Yes.
adjust if you
If I need to,
need
yes.
to,
Yes.
yeah.
Again, this micro, so it's the Audix MB 2050, so it's a 20-inch boom. And I have, the first 5 in front are cardioid, and the back are super cardioid. So I changed the balance out there on the pattern for that. And so, again, these mics actually work very, very well for choral. Anytime I'm doing a show with choir involved, this is the mic I right now for that. That's the purpose. And then our vocal mics have a sort of a different, so I have for our main 4 leaders, our worship leaders that lead on a Sunday, I use Sennheisers 3000 series with Neumann capsules, which they sound open, they're huge, just very nice. And then our BGVs will use Shure's KSM8s. I have KSM8s, Beta 58s and then 87As. I prefer the A's over the C's just because the A's are, again, what's it called, super cardioid, and it's just a much more, somewhat tighter pattern to it. And so that's what I use, and I have 12 channels of that, 12 RF channels. And to get to your question about how do we scan for frequency, so when we brought them in, we did a scanning over a week. Our AV on solder will do an RF scanning of the area, and to find the perfect clean channels. In our area, we did not have any open channels. I think we only have 2 open channels that are open, just in case if any of the other ones fall short. And so, and they'll constantly do scanning for us and give me an update of what's going on in the area.
That's
which
great.
is pretty cool. Yeah. Which is important because then obviously when you're on a mic, you don't want to hear an RF hit or anything like that. You're in worship. That's a bummer.
I also wanted to ask you about how you mic the piano.
So the piano, I'm using what's called the Beta 181s. They're Shure. They're very, very natural sounding for the piano. I've used, again, different ones, and those are actually the ones that fit well for the piano. So they're small mics like this, they're round, so they're flat. So I'm able to place them on the what do you call it, not the bridge, but the, yes. No, on the, with the railing of the piano inside. So I have some custom made stands I have, and I have the mic placed down there, and we shut it. So
You don't put it on the bottom of the lid.
No, I don't do that, no.
Why did
I've
you
done that
decide-
before,
Why did you decide to?
just because they will fall. I don't want to tape it onto the piano as well, to cause damage. And I wasn't really a fan of the sound either. Just didn't sound, I wasn't a big fan of it.
Interesting.
The little ones actually sound natural. I like to use those on upright pianos, when I'm on an upright piano. That does sound pretty good for those. So I do use those with uprights. Yes. And then we have for our cello mics and violins and bass, we use clip-on mic that clips onto the bridge. They're DPAs. Again, they sound as natural sounding to the instrument. Doesn't have weird enhancements or anything like that. And so that's what we use. And again, I enjoy them. They sound really, really, really good. And so we have about 2 cellos, 1 bass, and then 4 violins. And then everything else we kind of area mic. And the church owned 5 451s, AKG 451s. These are vintage mics, like 1970 models. Those work awesome on flutes, clarinets, and sometimes on timpani for like the chimes or on a tree or something. So, yeah, so that's what I use. And then for everything else, I use Neumann KM 184s, which are perfect for trumpets, trombones, tubas, any brass section of the orchestra. They sound great. So that's what I use for that. Any other mic questions, I guess, if you have? Or,
Are all the receivers and stuff for all the wirelesses, like, are they next to the stage or?
No, we have,
They're in the back.
we have an amp room upstairs where, pretty much where baptistry's at. We have a dedicated amp room with all our amps, receivers are there, and it's, again, when you're planning to move equipment like that to a different room, always have it ventilated. So we do have like an AC unit in there, and so we have it on there. And then I have a software on my computer that I'm able to see, battery level, RF, and signal as well. So that helps out a lot.
That's where the brains to the organ lives.
Yes.
Yeah. It's kind of the powerhouse of everything. And it does, it's on the second floor, kind of where the baptistry is. There's a little hallway behind there, and it's up there.
So yeah, all of our infrastructure is on a network, so I can get into our speaker system, I get into the console, I get into our wireless receivers. I can't get into the organ though. I think that's something separate. Pretty much everything else I can get into, and just maintenance, make sure everything's running
Wow,
properly.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool with the organ. We could literally call up David Ogletree, who's the manufacturer, and say, hey, we want to try this sound or that sound, and they'll program it in from Massachusetts, I think is where it is. Boston. And then we'll play it, and it's there. So it's pretty neat.
And the internet, man.
Yeah, so everything's on a network infrastructure.
Yeah. All of our video stuff is as well.
I think I did answer the question about why we didn't hang the mics. Did you get a chance to hear that? Just because of sight lines, that was another thing, and then to make it easier to get to them.
How many people are in your car?
It varies. We can have up to 40. That's our low number, and sometimes we can have up to 120 on special events. So.
And your church seats how many?
It used to seat 15.
It's
1,000,
about 1350-ish.
Yeah. So-
We lost, let me find, yeah, here, I'll show you here. We lost some seating because we brought the stairs actually out into the room. You used to have to go, you can kind of see where the stairwell is here, and you'd have to actually leave the room in order to get to the balcony. So we went ahead and brought the stairs down in. The front of house desk took up a little bit of space as well. Because everything used to actually live right up here with lighting, the lighting console. So we moved everything down because that was not a good place to have your front of house console. So, but yeah, and that's ultimately too why our cameras wound up so far in the back, because they did not want to lose seating. Before they were kind of in these general areas in the middle, which was great for camera operation, but it wasn't good because then once again, you're dealing with sight lines, and people had to kind of look around it. And plus for weddings and things like that, it's a lot easier to have these in the back and, just move them around a little bit than have them right out in the middle of everything. But there are times I do wish that they were closer. We have some really nice long throw lenses on them, but the more you zoom in, the more you can see the movement of the camera operator. So you're just barely having to kind of gently operate the camera. So it's challenging for the volunteers, but they do pretty good at it.
When you guys did your remodel, I know like your room is pretty classic style or shape, like front to back.
Correct.
So was there any like sound issues that you guys had to work through with that, or?
Not really. Sound issues to work through. As you can see, all that I explained to you earlier, pretty much anything you see fabric, that's all treatment.
Yeah.
And as well as this right here, this is a acoustic treatment as well, it's bass traps. Really, it was when our acoustician came in and looked at the room, he was like, man, this is the perfect room for orchestra, for classical.
Yeah.
Perfect room, shape, size, and everything.
Yeah.
He was very happy and excited to work in this room.
What's the natural reverb of the room?
The natural reverb at that time was, I believe, 6 seconds.
Wow.
It was a long reverb time. Now it's down to maybe close to 2. So, still having that ambient feel, and still having it live, but controlled in areas with the treatment.
Right. I'm just really glad to hear that there are people that have been working on being able to make it work for both kinds of things, you
Yes.
know? I don't know, just for so long, it seemed like it was either or, you know?
And I think, yeah, exactly, and I think that was the challenge when we went to Epic, the installers, was, hey, you know, this is what we're up against. Because at first, we were looking for a little bit more of a blended feel, but especially when we broke the two out, we really had to have, for two different expressions of worship, and really that's what we're here to talk about today, is just the difference in between the two. Having a room that could accommodate both of them and still sound good, and it
Mhm.
does, it totally sounds good. Really sounds like we're floating our own boat, but it's just, the designers did a great job. It sounds great.
For the first service, it's powerful enough to deliver that rock sound, you know, that's everyone's pretty much listening to, with all the Bethel and all that music, and then when classical comes around, you would expect for it to sound like that too, to be natural, open, not really amplified. Doesn't sound amplified. Again, it sounds very natural.
Also too, Danny, these platforms, we have the capability of putting in platforms in the orchestra pit. And we did use that for one of the AMC concerts. Wasn't there an
Yes.
orchestra involved?
Yes.
And you didn't even have to mic it, right? And it sounded really good.
They had, I think it was a 60-piece or 50-piece orchestra. It was mostly just string section and percussion, but and they had 130. They filled the choir up, so everybody was standing. It was very powerful. I didn't have to mic any. I pretty much didn't use the mics at all.
Right.
Yeah, I was able to get away without using any of that.
So you said around 92 dB for the
I run for
contemporary?
contemporary.
What's the classic?
Classic is
running?
about 89 to 90. It's just when the
Yeah.
organ hits in,
Of course.
it just spikes a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's not dramatic.
But
change.
they're kind of close, I mean, they're
It's close.
similar.
Yes.
Yeah.
It delivers that
That's
punch.
amazing.
It delivers that punch and that, you know, for first service and then classic service is really nice, and my terminology for it's just very airy. That's what classic, orchestras should sound like.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's it was a lot of attention to design when there were this stages of the worship center.
Thank you.
It's a fun room to work in. And obviously, our goal is to do all of this with as minimal amounts of distractions as possible.
Right, you want to be invisible.
Right, exactly. That's a great way to put it. And we like to be invisible.
Exactly.
But no, it's a lot of fun.